imagine waking up to see a letter that says the bridge where your father proposed. Where you proposed? Has to be torn down in 30 days by order of a homeowners association. What would you do if the HOA tried to bulldoze your family's most sacred memory? Me, I said. All right. You picked the wrong engineer. And, yeah. I meant it. My name's Garrett Donovan. I'm in my early 50s. A retired Army Corps engineer with hands that know the weight of a wrench and the truth of a level. After 2 decades building bridges in places that made the news for all the wrong reasons, I came home to the only place that ever made sense, a cedar-smelling 40s-era fishing cabin that my granddad built with his brothers along the shore of Lake Thornfield in upstate New York. The crown jewel wasn't the cabin, though. It was our stone footbridge hand-laid rock, wood planks that sing when you cross at dawn, and a little curve in the middle where sunlight collects like a blessing. That bridge carried my grandfather across to check his nets almost every morning of his life. It held my father's shaking hands the night he asked my mom to marry him. Autumn leaves spinning on water like confetti. Many years later, I stood there with a ring in my pocket, knees knocking, asking Sarah to take a chance on a loud laughing, road-worn engineer who smelled like diesel and coffee. She said yes. After she passed, that bridge became my ritual, the one place where I could still hear her. You know, in the way water talks when nobody's listening. Lake Thornfield used to be a quiet story told in pine needles and boot prints. Old-timers kept engines running with baling wire and goodwill. Walt Henderson, a Vietnam vet with a grin like a folded pocket knife, tuned up everybody's outboards for free. Miss Eleanor shared tomatoes that tasted like July. Tools moved from porch to porch without paperwork. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then came Thornfield Estates and, trailing behind it like an over-perfumed storm, Vivian Blackwood, 40s. Razor smile. The kind of money that says please with a thread under it. Picture a glass palace big enough to make a Roman museum blush. Perched just so on the ridgeline. White SUV gleaming like a space shuttle that missed the landing strip. She had a law degree, a business plan, and a handful of people who clapped when she talked about elevating standards. Our first run-in was at Murphy's Country Store. She was telling poor Betty behind the counter how peeling paint was a community hazard and how mailboxes needed, what did she call it, harmonized coloration. When she turned and clocked my Carhartt jacket and steel-toe boots, the smile she gave me could have sliced fruit. You must be one of our charming local residents, she said, making charming sound like a diagnosis. 6 months later, charming turned into non-compliant. Her beautification campaign landed like a drone strike, Walt's bass boat eyesore. Eleanor's vegetable rose agricultural inappropriateness. My bridge, structurally questionable and aesthetically incompatible. That's what the violation notice said in italics. Like perfume sprayed on a thread. I walked the violation letter up to her marble kingdom, carrying my grandfather's old survey and the 40s-era building permit he'd framed and hung in the cabin. Her foyer smelled like expensive candles and intimidation. I laid my papers right there on her imported Italian countertop. This bridge was here long before your HOA. I told her, it's historic. It's safe. And it's none of your business. She drummed perfect nails on perfect stone. The community has voted. Mr. Donovan, 30 days to comply. We're curating a luxury experience. Curate this. I didn't say. But my eyes probably did. 3 nights later, she staged an emergency board meeting at 7 in the evening on a Tuesday classic. Her living room was all glass, all glare. The lake framed behind her like a hostage. She'd packed the room with fresh arrivals who wore the same watch and the same worry about property values. On the coffee table, a fat folder that read Bridge Safety Assessment. Big red letters. Very official. Inside 3 pages of technobabble and grainy photos that made my granddad's stonework look like a popsicle stick fort. I read 1 page, then looked at the letterhead. Blackwood Construction Consulting. Your brother-in-law. I said. She shrugged. He's qualified. Qualified to invoice you? Sure. They voted anyway, hands up. Eyes down, because there's people who'll outsource judgment if you give them a clipboard. The gavel came down, removed the bridge, or paid daily fines that would make a loan shark blush. I walked out into cold air and a colder, kind of quiet. The kind where neighbors study their windshields when you pass. I don't scare easy. And I sure don't fold when a bully says, boo. So I went to war the way my old CO taught me: get the facts. Stack the facts. Then let the facts do the talking. I camped at the county office for a week, living on coffee that tasted like burnt toast and old arguments. I dug through maps older than rock and found a yellowed survey from the early 1940s, a county easement running right under my bridge like a steel spine. Public right-of-way older than any covenant she could waive. On top of that, the HOA bylaws had a carve-out bigger than a barn door for structures that existed before the association and carried historical significance. My bridge fit both like a glove. Next meeting. I didn't walk in alone. I brought County Clerk Patricia Santos, a woman whose face says no without wasting a syllable. She unrolled those maps on Vivian's cathedral coffee table and stamped that easement with the county seal so hard the marble winced. This is outside HOA jurisdiction. Patricia said. Votes null and void. Silence. Then Vivian smiled the way a cornered cat smiles. You may have won this battle, Mr. Donovan. She said through teeth she could have used as a straight edge. But the war is far from over. She wasn't wrong. She was just HOA. Mistaken about who had the ammo. The next phase wasn't a frontal assault. It was paper cuts. 1,000 of them. Suddenly, my morning engine check at dawn was a noise violation. My tackle box, which had sat in the same shelf since the Eisenhower years, was unsightly storage visible from the water. Each letter came with a fine. Each fine came with a daily escalation fee. An inspector named Craig started showing up every Tuesday with a tape measure and the eager energy of a hall monitor who finally got a badge. He measured my grass like it was a runway at LaGuardia. He measured my dock boards as if a splinter might tank the market. And then came the whispers. At the store, the post office, people saying I was unstable, people saying I was dangerous, that I had, issues. The night I spotted a gray sedan idling just off my property line for the 3rd time in a week. I walked up and tapped the window. The guy inside smelled like cheap cologne and cheaper excuses. Just conducting a community safety assessment, he muttered. Private investigator. Hired by the HOA. For property value protection. I installed cameras. Military paranoia dies hard. And sometimes sorry. But it shouldn't. 3 days later, my dock groaned like an old man and then sagged. The post had clean saw marks. Not weather. Not age. Sabotage. The midnight camera captured a slim figure. White clothes. Purposeful stride. Walt came over. Watched the footage. And grunted. Seen that gait. Same height. Same hips. Our queen bee. I'd bet my last lucky lure. I didn't take the bait. Not yet. Then came the wellness check. Sheriff's Deputy Maria Santos pulled up one morning, cool. Professional. The kind of eye contact that lets you breathe. Vivian trailed her in the white SUV. Mascara of concern perfectly applied. We're worried about Mr. Donovan, she told the deputy. The tissue already out. He's paranoid. He's isolated. We fear for his safety. Good morning, I said, setting down my tools and handing over a neat binder. Dates, letters, photos, doc footage queued on a tablet. Deputy, I believe you'll find a pattern of harassment. Deputy Santos flipped pages, watched video, blew out a breath. Ma'am, she said, turning to Vivian with a look I've only ever seen in basic training when a recruit tried to argue with gravity. Filing false reports carries consequences. Mr. Donovan seems organized. Vivian adjusted a bracelet that probably cost more than my truck and tried on another smile. Just trying to protect the community. Sure you are. When her smear job didn't stick, a thick letter did. According to her math, I now owed a small fortune in fines and administrative fees. And if I didn't pay within 2 months, she'd slap a lien on the cabin my grandfather built with blood and stubbornness. I didn't panic. I did research. If you want to beat a bully who hides behind rules, learn the rules better than they do. In dusty records and old company filings. I uncovered the story Lake Thornfield doesn't tell out loud. It wasn't a gift from glaciers. It was a man-made lake born when a dam choked a little river mid-century. The developer who built it went belly up. And over a series of transfers and auctions, the dam ended up in a private trust so old it creaked when I opened the file. My grandfather's trust. I didn't just inherit the cabin. I inherited the dam. And with it, a kind of power most folks don't know exists, the legal right to manage water levels on an artificial lake. In plain talk, I could lower that lake to inspect and maintain the structure mandated by environmental regulations that care a whole lot about concrete that keeps water where it belongs. I drove into town and hired a water rights attorney named Rebecca Sterling, who wore boots with her suit and smiled like a person who enjoys winning cleanly. She read my deed. Read the statutes. Then tapped a page. Mr. Donovan, you hold superior water rights. When a lake exists because a dam says so, the dam owner's responsibilities and authority beat out shoreline preferences every day of the week. Routine dewatering for safety and habitat. That's not just legal, it's encouraged. I could have danced. Instead, I built a plan. I didn't want to hurt my neighbors, the old-timers. Anyway, so we studied the dam like it was a patient auxiliary spillways. Valves, pressure curves, with careful control. We could drop the southern basin, the fancy house side, by 8 to 12 feet. Strand the new docks on mud like beached whales. And still leave enough navigable water on the north end for folks who use boats to fish. Not to brag, the environmental angle wasn't spin. It was science. Lowering levels would expose and restore spawning beds. Flush algae. And let us examine concrete that hadn't seen daylight since before the internet. We filed the paperwork exactly the way the state wants it. With every T crossed hard enough to dent the page. 30 days notice. Public postings. Official stamps. Photographs of the dam's hairline worries. Marcus Anderson. The county's environmental inspector and an old friend from overseas reviewed it all and nodded. Looks textbook. I put together a little war council at my supper table. Walt for security and intel. Miss Eleanor for community messaging because nobody on this earth says hard truth softer. Murphy the contractor. Not the shop because he knows silt. Rebar, and how to coax stubborn machinery with equal parts finesse and profanity. Marcus, to keep us straight with the agency. Rebecca, to make sure every move we made rested on law as solid as poured stone. We didn't hide. We didn't gloat. We held coffee nights where Eleanor explained spawning beds and algae blooms to worried neighbors with pictures of fish so adorable, even hard cases went quiet. We told the truth lower now so it's healthy later. Maintenance isn't malice. Stewardship ain't sabotage. Vivian heard rumblings and assumed because bullies project that I was playing a legal game I didn't understand. She tried to get ahead by sending a midnight crew to fix the spillway. Walt's cameras caught them the moment their boot soles touched fence. By the time I stepped out of the dark, they were cutting with torches. A blue spray of sparks falling like fireworks into the black water. Evening. Gentlemen, I said, that equipment looks felony adjacent. They folded. Every single one by sunrise. I'd filed charges. It turns out judges get very serious when you mess with water infrastructure. Then came the press. Not because I called them first, but because Vivian did. Her campaign painted me as a bitter old vet trying to ruin a luxury resort for kicks. She hired a fancy environmental law firm out of Manhattan and filed an emergency motion to stop the vandalism. The hearing took place in a courthouse that smells like varnish and patience. Rebecca laid out our filings, our inspections, our plan monitoring. Marcus wore his state badge and explained, calmly, that this was overdue compliance. Judge Kellerman flipped pages for a long minute, then said words I swear made the room brighter. Motion denied. Proceed. Vivian stared straight ahead. Yav pulsing. Her lawyers packed their briefcases with the gentle speed of men billing by the minute on the way out. I won't pretend I didn't feel a thrill. But it wasn't victory I tasted, it was relief. Because now we could do the right thing out in the open. Memorial Day weekend was coming. Perfect weather. Perfect crowds. Perfect moment for a lesson in who actually owns a lake when that lake is made by human hands. The morning we turned the wheel. The air smelled like cut grass and charcoal smoke. Families lined the shore with coolers and folding chairs. Boats bobbed like excited dogs on leashes. On a concrete platform that had held back a valley's worth of water for longer than I've been alive. We assembled me, Marcus with a state clipboard, Deputy Santos for safety, Rebecca, cool as January, 2 camera crews, 1 local reporter who knows the lake by heart, and a handful of neighbors who came to witness, not gloat. Not jeer, just witness. Vivian arrived late. Fast. And loud. Tire squeal. Big sunglasses. A pair of security guards who looked like they were paid to look like security guards. Her hair was perfect. Her voice wasn't. You can't do this, she shouted. The words breaking like thin ice. Deputy Santos moved just enough to be between Vivian and the controls. Ma'am, please step back. Marcus held up the state order. Seal glinting. Mandated maintenance. Interference would be unwise. Vivian's guards suddenly needed to check something way over there. I set my hand on the wheel. For a second, I felt my grandfather's palm over mine, the old man's callus, in the same place as mine. The same stubborn streak. I breathed in, breathed out. Then turned. Metal groaned. Somewhere deep in the dam, ancient machinery woke like a bear rolling out of sleep. The first rush of water roared through the spillway. A sound like wind pulling secrets out of stone. The surface dipped barely. Then a touch more. Then enough for your eye to catch it. People oohed in the way humans do when nature does something honest in front of them. An hour passed. You could see rings on pilings that hadn't seen daylight since the Clinton years. 2 hours. And sleek resort boats started listing awkwardly rich people toys kneeling in mud. By noon, the South Basin looked like somebody had taken a bite. You could walk out onto flats that used to be 10 feet deep. Hear mud squelch. See little silver fish dart into new channels. Flares of life everywhere. Sun warmed the exposed stone of my grandfather's bridge. And I swear, it smiled. The reporter Jake asked for a comment. I didn't look at Vivian. I looked at the water. This isn't about revenge. I said, it's about doing maintenance we should have done years ago. It's about habitat, safety, and remembering that a lake like this only exists because people decided to hold back a river. We gotta, take care of what we build. Behind us, investors in press shirts did math on their phones and did not like the answers. By late afternoon, the resort's fancy dock sat dry like a stranded ribcage. A chef in a spotless jacket leaned on a catering truck and stared at a lakeside patio that now overlooked the world's most expensive mudflat. Banners drooped. The band packed up quietly. Vivian stood at the edge of the platform, hands shaking, staring as if she could will the water back. For the first time since she'd rolled into town, there was no one to clap. The following days were all work. We monitored turbidity and oxygen, photographed cracks now visible, patched small worries, and scheduled big fix-ups. We shaped temporary channels for fish. We taught kids Eleanor did. Really why mud smells the way it does and why that's good when it's supposed to happen. The North End still carried boats for folks who needed them. Walt grinned from his little motor like a boy with a bike after snowmelt. Vivian tried another angle. Anonymous complaints to every agency with an acronym. Posts online about my dangerous instability. Rumors that I'd threatened people. That I was hoarding chemicals. That my dock was a militia outpost. Agencies came. They inspected. They shook hands. One investigator actually bought a jar of Miss Eleanor's pickles and asked for her recipe, which look felt like a civic victory. Her last legal dart missed by a mile. When the court denied her injunction, they also handed her a bill for costs. Turns out you can't cry wolf in front of a judge and then stick the county with your tab. The number was painful if you live on invoices and catering. It was catastrophic if your whole empire's levered to a lake staying full. Meanwhile, the lake breathed. Lower water let sunlight reach spawning beds that had been starved to shadow. Mink showed up where they hadn't in years. Turtles moved like tiny, ancient tugboats through warm shallows. Algae, starved of its favorite summer buffet, fell back. The smell changed from stagnant sweet to clean. Tours came through from a state university. Kids squealed when a frog jumped. Parents took pictures of tadpoles like they were celebrities. It felt like a county fair held by the water itself. Community, too, remembered itself. Old-timers and new folks raked trash off the exposed bottom, laughing the way you do when you realize your neighbor isn't the caricature a rumor drew. A guy with a very expensive watch and a very sincere apology helped Walt haul an old tire. Didn't know, he said, looking at the shallows, that a lake can get sick and need a reset. Walt slapped his back. Lots of things do. And the bridge, our bridge, earned what it should have always had: respect. The new board, yeah. We'll get there, would later pass a resolution naming it a community heritage asset. That day, it simply stood, warm to the touch, while another dawn washed over it. But before the election, before the apologies, came one last ugly turn. Vivian walked into Murphy's store carrying an envelope so thick it had a spine. She found me by the jerky and fishing gear. $50,000, she said under her breath. You stop. We call it a misunderstanding. And everyone sleeps better. Not for sale. I said, hitting record on my phone. And I sleep fine. She swallowed the anger. It showed in her throat. Then, desperate, she started dialing up pressure in places she didn't understand. State officials didn't bite. The bank, faced with filings in plain English, blinked hard at their covenants. Insurance adjusters started using phrases like excluded events and uninsurable loss. The investor group, which had put serious money into a premium lakeside destination. Asked questions nobody could answer, while a camera panned to boats tilted on dirt. Look, I ain't proud of how good that felt. I am proud of what happened next. We finished the maintenance. We documented every patch, every measure, every fish that returned where we opened passage. After a set period, the one the state requires, we closed the spillways. Then watched the lake climb back into its bowl like it belonged there. Water lapped pricey pilings. Then lifted boats gentle as a hand under a child's chin. You could hear practical people exhale. You could see hopeful ones smile. By late summer, the water was clearer than I'd seen since I was a kid. The bays turned mean again in the good way. Families stopped to watch minnows chasing light along the shore. My bridge glowed in evening gold. It didn't feel like a win. It felt like forgiveness. The HOA elections came due. The slate of candidates who'd treated residents like obstacles lost so bad even their signs looked embarrassed. The new board chair is a nurse who can calm a room with 3 sentences and a cookie. Walt signed on as a safety liaison. Miss Eleanor runs the Community Relations Committee. Of course she does. Marcus consults on environmental planning, so we stay ahead of the next maintenance cycle. The first official act was to recognize pre-existing structures with genuine history as protected elements of community heritage. Somebody made a motion to start with a certain stone bridge. The vote was unanimous. Funny how easy democracy is when the people in the room remember their neighbors first. As for me, I found myself saying yes to things I once avoided. The county asked me to chair an advisory group on water management. I built a guide, a plain language, step-by-step survival map for folks getting bulldozed by their HOAs. Not legal advice, don't need a lawsuit, but hard-earned strategies, learn the rules. Tell the truth. Do the work. Document everything. And never confuse loud with right. People started writing from all over. Our HOA says my flagpole isn't in the right place. They measured my grass with a ruler. They fined me for having a truck in my own driveway. Some stories broke my heart. Some made me want to sorry cuss. All of them made me stubborn in a better way, the kind that stands up straight. Not the kind that throws elbows first. 6 months after we turned the wheel, I sat on the bridge at sunrise with coffee and a dented thermos and felt the boards hum under my boots. The lake wore that early morning glass. The kind you're afraid to touch because it's too perfect to disturb. A trout jumped. Little circle, spreading slow. Somewhere down the shore. A kid laughed at something small and important. I thought about Sarah. I always will. Sometimes folks ask, Garrett, be honest, wasn't this just payback? I get it. The timing was sharp. The optics, brutal. The resort's soft opening happened to land on the day the water moved backward. Investors frowned into cameras. But here's the thing, we did what the law required and what the lake needed. We filed it right. We measured twice. We cut once. That's not revenge. That's responsibility. And if responsibility also ended a reign of petty control, maybe that's what justice looks like in small towns. Vivian, she left like a storm that runs out of warm air loud. Then gone. The resort slid into bankruptcy like a boat that missed its line. Her lenders called notes and found she had more collateral than cushion. She sold her glass palace for a fraction. Then drove south on the interstate toward a new story she'll tell about how unfair people can be when you're trying to elevate standards. There'll be someone, somewhere, who nods along. There always is. The rest of us got busy being neighbors again. We built an environmental education weekend with a couple of state grants and a lot of donated sandwiches. We host workshops for kids where they plant native grasses and name frogs like pets they don't have to feed. The university sent grad students who think my coffee is too strong and my data is beautiful. I tease them. They teach me. It works. We set aside a day each summer to celebrate lake stewardship. No speeches longer than the attention span of a 9-year-old. No shaming. Just work gloves. Laughter. And the kind of barbecue that starts arguments about sauce. Property values crept up not because we chased aesthetics, but because clarity and fish do more for a lake than matching mailboxes. A month ago, my grandnephew walked his girlfriend to the crown of the bridge at dusk, hands shaking in that universal way. He asked. She said yes. They cried. We all did. The bridge just stood there. The way true things do. If you're listening because your HOA has decided that control is the same thing as leadership, hear me, hear us. You don't need a dam to push back. You need patience. You need documents. You need to understand the bylaws as well as the board does. Then better, find the easements. Find the exceptions. Speak the language of the rule book until the people who hide behind it run out of places to hide. And do it with care. Don't become what you're fighting. Also, take a breath. Eat a cookie at Miss Eleanor's table if you can. There's usually coffee. I'll leave you with this. Every neighborhood has a Vivian, someone who mistakes money for merit and volume for vision. But every neighborhood also has a Walt who knows when to watch quietly. An Eleanor who knows how to say the hardest thing with the kindest voice. A Murphy who can fix what's broken with his hands and a joke. And a whole lot of folks in between who just want peace. So what would you do if an HOA came after your family's bridge? Your porch swing. Your flag. Your garden, would you lawyer up? Lay low. Turn a wheel, drop a comment, and tell me your story. I read every single one. Anyone else had a HOA do this to you? What happened? What did you learn? And hey, if you're watching from somewhere I haven't been, let me know where you are. I love hearing how different a sunrise looks when you're the one standing in it.